Hello, everyone. I am Jan Jeremias, and I am proud to be with you today on Pets, People, Life, and Longevity. And basically, we talk about anything that is revolving pets and people. So that could be the way they support us, and it could be much more practical things about having a pet and what that means and our responsibility to them as far as I'm concerned. And that could be health or whatever. A little bit about me. I've been working with pets in the wellness realm for probably close to 15 years or so. So love it. Do work with people, helping their pets with supplements and essential oils and Reiki and gentle massage and anything pretty much holistic that you can do. I could probably suggest or guide. I'm not a veterinarian, so let's just make that clear right away. So today, and I'm really excited to welcome our guest who's coming back to us for a second time, Debra Hamilton. So hi, Debra.
Hey, Jan, it's so good to be back with you. You've provided such wonderful information to people, and I love the disclaimer because I always disclaim that I'm licensed to practice law in New York. If you contact me outside of New York, I'm just giving you information, not legal advice. So this discussion is really going to be about things that we're going to address in your neck of the woods that you really have to pay attention to. And if you want some more information, get in touch with me. I'm just so glad to be back here to talk to you about such important information that you share.
Yeah. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, Debra, and how you sort of got to where you are? Because that's interesting in itself.
So I'm an attorney who decided about 13 years ago now, to hang up my litigation pumps and help people to resolve conflicts using alternative dispute resolution, i.e. mediation or collaborative practice, instead of going to court, because everybody forgets about the pet when they get to court because they want to win. They don't want to get it right. They want to be right. So I've really started a niche practice that helps people resolve conflicts. So you're thinking, what conflicts could arise? Well, divorce, landlord-tenant, breeder, owner, handler, veterinarian, you name it, groomer, you name it. Everybody can have a disagreement. And then around 2013, I broke my ankle and realized I didn't have a plan for the care of my pets. And I had 9 dogs at the time. So imagine trying to feed them and take care of them with a broken ankle. So I created a plan that now has a huge community following called the MAAP plan, which navigates the journey your pet takes when you can't care for it. So we help people make plans, address the needs of their pets, appoint caregivers, and then publish that plan so Jan knows what you want her to do with your dog if something happens. So that's the journey I've taken. I now have spoken internationally about how to speak to your veterinarian in a way that really is collaborative, how to help veterinarians speak to their clients in a way that's collaborative and less adversarial, and really have helped people maintain relationships when they have a bias or perspective that they just need to check in on, and often find, oh my God, I didn't know you didn't mean it the way I took it, Jan. And so I've saved many a relationship in that we just take a breath, we take a step back, we ask curious questions. So that's where I am now. I'm helping people, especially in divorce, because some of the states, I think there are 5 now, that are asking judges to decide who would be the best owner in the best interest of the pet. And I had Judge the Honorable Doug Minsk on, and he goes, I never can understand why people hand me the future of their dogs just because I wear a black robe. And so that's what I do. I help people decide the future of their pets among themselves, because who better knows Tonka and who better knows Junie than you and I?
Absolutely. So true. And, being divorced, I remember that, I was very lucky because my ex actually was very happy, really felt like she was my dog, which she was, and was very clear that he was willing to give her to me. But I know that not all relationships end like that, and not all parties involved actually are willing to do that and kind of step back and say, okay, what's in the best interest of the pet, and where are they going to have the least amount of adjustment problems? Yes, she missed him, but basically everything else stayed the same. So, and that was very important to me. We stayed in the same house. We stayed in the same place.
Yeah, and that's the rule of law is, it's called the Raymond rule, which was a case about Lovey and keeping the dog where it lived and where it felt love and knew love. And my caveat to that is, of course, if you weren't in the picture, if something happened to you, she would pick your ex. I always say, unfortunately, your pet doesn't hate your ex. You really wish they would. That would make it so much easier, but they don't. So when I do these things, I always like to at least check in to see if something happened. Would you like them to go back to the person they knew at the time? They might be young and it might be 10 years down the pike, but it's always good, as with the MAAP plan, to have an heir and a spare, to have somebody they know in their life. And also, most of the time when some of these decisions are made, the non-moneyed spouse gets the pet. And then if the pet has a catastrophic injury, who's going to pay for it? So I always like to keep that door open. I never slam any doors. I keep those doors open because you know what? You never know that your ex, who doesn't like you very much, but really if something happened to your dog, they would like to help you, because that's usually the last best thing everybody has in their relationship, is their relationship with the pet.
Well, it's interesting that you were talking about this, because I have a client right now who's recently separated from her husband and is undergoing a divorce. And so they had 2 dogs, and one was fairly new and he wanted, so he took that dog and she got the dog they had, who was very close to her. And she travels a lot. And originally he was taking the dog when she traveled. But now what's happened is he's actually seeing somebody with 2 dogs. And those dogs don't like her dog. So all of a sudden she's like traveling again. And she's like, I feel like I don't want him to go to there anymore, because, it's a lot of stress for him because he doesn't get along with those 2 dogs. So all of a sudden the situation where she might have actually had a plan to say, okay, well, if anything happens to me, they should go to, my ex-husband or my ex-partner. And now that might not take place because he's now in a different situation.
Absolutely. That's why we always say 3, because you want to make sure that if the person who would be your first pick turns out not to be a very good pick overall because they move to a no-PIP building, they get involved with someone who doesn't like dogs, or they bring pets into their house that your dog doesn't get along with. You want to make sure that there's always somebody else. Okay, so he can't take it, but my girlfriend can take it, my other friend can take it, the groomer can take it. So you just want to make sure there's always that heir and a spare.
So today I thought we could explore a little bit, since July is Pet Lost Prevention Month. So not preventing your
loss, not losing your pet as in forever,
right?
Well, forever, but not that they cross the rainbow bridge, but rather you lose them, because especially with 4th of July coming up, it's a great time to have this conversation.
No, absolutely. And it was really interesting. One of the things that sparked me to actually want to get on is I was actually pet sitting for somebody who does not collar her dogs. So she has their collars attached to the leash. Well, actually, I was really lucky because the front door doesn't close well. And all of a sudden I got there and I came back and I'd run out to the car for something, but the door was open. And I thought, here these pets are not collared. I'm a stranger. And if they got out, who are they calling? There's no identifier on them. I don't know if they were microchipped. I don't remember. But I was like, wow, this is kind of like an accident waiting to happen.
Well, you need to tell her next time you watch her dogs that she needs to tell you about the microchip, the veterinarian, the neighbors that are friends who might be able to help you if, God forbid, something happens. These are all things you set up before you ask Jan to watch your dogs. So Jan has the best chance of taking care of your dogs completely. Really is important when you're having somebody watch your pets. I never let anybody off my property, and it's hard when you live in an apartment because they have to walk the dogs, but I'm always petrified that the dogs will get away. It's interesting that you said they don't wear collars. A lot of people don't like their dogs to wear collars because it makes a crease in their neck. However, a crease in their neck is so much better than having them get lost. So I leave my collars on my dogs and I just bathe them a few times before we go to the dog show to get the crease out of their neck. And if it's there, oh well. It is very scary to lose your dog. The 4th of July is coming. Summer's coming. People take their dogs on vacation. It's a new environment. They might be the easiest, most wonderful, easygoing dogs, and something can happen and they can take off. What happens if they get picked up? Well, you have to really know the area that you're traveling to. You really should check out animal care and control. I know it's not like a spa that you want to check out to make sure that everything is going to go well. But if you get lost somewhere, you're really going to have to know how to do the detective work to find your dog again.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was really interesting because I've always to me, a collar is like a necessity no matter where. And Tonka actually hates to be without his collar. It's very funny. It's almost like it's a necklace he wears all the time. So you can tell that when I take him off to bathe him or brush him, that he kind of he gets very, he gets the
Where are my clothes?
Where are my clothes? Exactly. It's so funny to me. But
well, that is the story in Lady and the Tramp.
Right.
The best gift you could ever get was a collar.
I love that. And it's so true. Now he is microchipped, and I ended up getting him microchipped when I was moving for fear that if we did get separated, it was a new place, he might want to wander back home to where we were living. And I didn't want to take a chance that if he happened to get out or we got separated, that I wouldn't be able to get back together with him. Well, I think what was totally astonishing to me, and I think I shared this with you prior, is the statistics, which in the United States, well, North America, a family pet is lost every 2 seconds. And that is that's
mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling because you think, well, no, that's never going to happen. You always have your dog on a leash. You always have them in a fenced-in backyard. However, things happen. The delivery man comes, leaves the gate open. I remember my husband and I were just married, and a dog was wandering down the street, and he was very scared. And I called his name and he stopped, and he almost came to me, but then my dog at the time came barking at the door, and he got scared and kept running. And unfortunately he got hit by a car down the street, and I was terribly upset. And he didn't have a microchip. It was back in the 80s. He didn't have a microchip. They might not have even been invented by then. But his owner said the gate was left open by the people that had just moved in, by the people who did landscaping. And there's a big sign on it, don't leave it open. And they didn't know. So these are real things that happen, unintentional. People are distracted, God forbid, the phone, the this, the that, they just don't remember to close the gates. I mean, my gates are closed and buckle clipped, so that you have to do 2 actions to open my cages, my gates. And a lot of the people who come and do lawn and everything here go, this is a real pain. And I said, good. I said, so let me remind you to do it. And I never let the dogs out without checking if the gates are closed. And my dogs will come when I call them. But you know what? They could go out in the middle of the night. Somebody could open a gate, and then I fall back to sleep or something, and that would never happen, but it might. And they take off. And what do? Well, you really have to spend a lot of time looking for them. You have to do a concerted effort looking for them, whether you're home and you're going to your local animal care and control, your local veterinarians, your local police department. Do a concerted effort. I mean, always take pictures of your dogs. I know we sometimes take pictures of our dogs, but always pose them. I just got the most beautiful picture of Mariah from the Veterinarian Bridges Professional Animal Hospital. I love it. It's a great picture. And I said, God forbid she won't, but if she got lost, this is a great picture to post because people could see she's this big. This is what she looks like. You want to take a good picture of your dog, maybe twice a year. Just take a good mugshot of your dog, so that if God forbid they got out, you'd have a good picture of them, so that you could post it. And then you want to put it up on the trees and the telephone poles, and go to animal care and control, and go to the police department, and go to local shop owners, because you want to make as great an effort for as long as you can. I mean, some people do it over a weekend and then go, oh, probably gone. You should do it for at least, I would say, 3 to 6 months, because dogs can be taken in by a good Samaritan who doesn't necessarily come to town. I remember a story where a girl found a dog and then went back to school in another state. So she found the dog, let's say in New Hampshire, and went back to school in Massachusetts. And the dog was gone because the dog was lost, and she thought she was giving it a great home and took it. And she came back to visit her friend in New Hampshire, and she was going through a Starbucks or a McDonald's, and the person behind her said, "Wait a minute, that's my dog." And so they stopped her, and sure enough, the microchip was to this guy. And he actually did get his dog back because it was only about 6 months or a year that she'd been taking care of it. But as we talked about before we got on recording, you have to check with your local ordinances. You have between 3 to 7 days to remove a dog from animal care and control before they release it to a shelter. And once they release it to a shelter, if they're calling you and you don't answer your phone because your number's on the microchip, or God forbid you've moved or changed your telephone number and didn't call the microchip company to change your telephone number or to change your address, because that is sometimes the single most important reason why dogs or cats don't get home, is because you've changed your telephone number. And when they're calling, they're not calling, they might call your house. And now we all have cell phones, right? So you really need to make sure that all your information, and you can call the microchip company, once a year and just say, everything up to date? Great. Just to make sure that when they call you, you're going to answer the phone.
Mm-hmm.
But you really do have to get them out of animal care and control before they go to rescue or shelters, because if they are released to a rescue or shelter, it means that the person who owns it isn't looking for it, or they can't establish contact with that person. During COVID, that was huge because people were intubated and couldn't answer the phone. So dogs are being released and being rehomed. And once they're rehomed from a rescue or a shelter, you can't get them back. There are really smart attorneys who make sure that if you adopt a dog like Tonka, because you adopted Tonka, that I can't find you 2 years later and say, that's my dog. It's not good. It might be my dog, absolutely, but I'm not going to get it back. And I do a lot of work with people who have taken dogs in, and then somebody said, "Oh my God, that's my dog," and the person who adopted it isn't going to give it up and feels very frightened that this person's going to sue them. I try to get everyone to recognize that this dog loves two people, and if you can be magnanimous enough to allow the person to maybe come and see the dog, or if you're going on vacation and you can, have a good relationship, that's great. But if not, as I said, even with that, you could maybe, if something happened to you, the dog would go to back to the first owner. So you have an heir and a spare, so to speak. It's something that you don't ever want to have happen, but you have to act quickly to find your dog. And you have to really make a concerted effort to find your dog, because if you don't and you go to court, microchips are only one indicia of ownership, and it depends on how the courts feel whether or not you're going to get that dog back, and it's going to cost you thousands of dollars to sue to get your dog back.
It was interesting because the two examples you gave have both happened to me. One is in my old house where I had a fenced-in yard. My last dog got out because somebody, my landscaper or one of the guys that worked for him, actually left the gate open, and she got out. And then the other thing that happened, which I learned, and I had to have my fence lowered and actually dug underground, was she was a digger. Yeah. So I came home from work one day and she was gone, and there I am, like screaming in the streets for her and everything, and obviously in a panic when this kid came up and said, "Do you have a dog or whatever?" And I said, "Yeah." They said, "Oh, okay." The police came and took it to animal control. So I got her back that same night. And they had my number because she was tagged and she did have a collar and everything. But those were things that, I figured I figured she was safe because she was in a fenced-in yard and whatever. And
so many things can happen. My dogs were in a fenced-in yard, and one of the dogs I was looking after, he was there during his family's being on vacation. I take my babies back when their owners go on vacation, and he got out. And everyone knew in the neighborhood that I have the red dog. So, I just thought, but if somebody sees it, they'll call me. The one neighbor that I didn't know, because their kids were much older than my kids, and so I didn't know them, he was the one who saw the dog on the road, and he said, I better put this dog in my garage so that it doesn't get hit by a car. However, then Shane couldn't get out of the garage when I called him, right? And I couldn't see him, I guess, maybe barking at the window, who knows. So until that night when he told one of the neighbors, I got this red dog in my garage, and they go, oh my God, Deborah's been looking for that dog for hours. I finally got him back like you, but nothing is foolproof. I have learned that. I had invisible fencing, and I had hard fencing. So I was doing both duties. And nothing is inevitable. And I had dachshunds. So anyone who has a little rodent kind of dog, I love them. They dig really good holes really quickly. And so anyone who leaves a dog in the backyard, it could be like Fort Knox, and they may be able to get out, get over, get under. I remember a colleague of mine passed away, and the only thing everybody was worried about was that one of the dogs she had, would go to someone with covered runs, because this dog could get out of, she was Houdini. She could get out of any fence. She would go right over a 12-foot fence, no problem. And so they said, you really need to make sure it has, all four sides are gated, or she's on a leash.
Wow. And so maybe we can talk a little bit about ways to prevent. So we all know that, situations happen, you have a fenced in yard, you do the best you can, and then after Casey got out once, I mean, every time I let her out, I would sit there and, I would go out and check and make sure the gate was locked before I let her out after that. But then you realize.
So you can do the best you can. There are always the, unknown eventualities that might happen. But the best thing to do is I always say, make friends with animal care and control so they know who your dog is. So if they see it on the road, they go, oh, that's Jan's dog, Tonka. I think I got to pick that dog up, take it home to Jan. Most people want to steer clear of animal care and control. However, it's worth the fine you might get for the dog being, roaming the streets than for people not to know who the dog is. And if you make an effort to know the people in your neighborhood, so they know you walk that black and white dog, or you walk that little black dog, or you walk that big white dog, or whatever. It's always good to know the neighbors, and to let them know. I know that all the neighbors in my current neighborhood in North Carolina know Junie, and they consider him their dog. So if he, God forbid, was ever running on Country Club Drive, somebody who saw him would stop and call him and bring him in the car, because they would be like, my God, that's Junie. So the first thing to do is make sure that people know who you are and who your dog is, the pair, right? You are inseparable from your dog. If you're going to leave it in a pen, make sure you have somebody checking it all the time. If you're not going to be home, if you're home, invest in a ring, the cameras, to make sure that the dog isn't digging. Because if you had, or whomever had the dog dig out from under, if you had a ring, you could have seen that naughty little thing digging in the back of the pen and go, excuse me, we're not doing that. So do that. Always have a microchip, always have a collar. And I'm a big fan of collars that have it either embroidered onto it, or there's a riveted tag on it, not the tags hanging from the little hooks. I just think that those can be taken off. So can collars. If somebody's hell-bent on leather to take your dog, they're going to take your collar off. And I never leave my dogs outside. It's interesting. Somebody said to me, we never see your dogs. We never even know you have dogs, except you walk them all the time. And I said, well, the front yard is like the worst place to allow your dog to be unattended, especially if it's one of the hut breeds, which is like a French bulldog, because people will swoop by and pick it up, and then it's gone. And if they don't bring it to have it microchipped, or they, take it, unload it, and then the person thinks they bought it from that nice woman, Jan, and doesn't turn out that it was a legal sale, let's say, and they bring it to the vet. If the vet asks them, can I microchip it? If they say, well, I got this dog from a breeder, it's a wonderful woman. And the vet could ask, can I microchip it, and see what the microchip is? And then they might fine me. However, they don't have to microchip. It isn't required for veterinarians to scan dogs for microchips. Most people who would get a dog might ask, to see if there's a microchip so they can return it. And most people want to return it to its original owner. But I had a case just recently where a family took care of a cat for 2 years that they couldn't put their hands on. The cat was so skittish, they couldn't put their hands on it for 2 years. They took care of it for 2 years. They built it a catio outside, so it was out of the elements. And she finally got her hands on it, took it to the vet to have it vaccinated and have blood drawn and have it flea dipped and cut nails and all the rest, have a spa treatment. And for some reason, the vet decided to scan it. And without permission. So that's a whole different discussion about what the vet client relationship is. It's with the person who brings the pet in. So it's not you who lost the pet, it's the person who brings the pet in. And they returned it to the person on the microchip. And your listeners and watchers might say, oh, well, good, that person got the cat back. Well, the caveat is that the veterinarian didn't really have the right to give the cat back. And they shared with the cat owner that the prior cat's owner had already gotten 2 new cats in the 2 years and wasn't sure that those cats would get along with the old cat, right? And they wouldn't let her know who the person was who they gave the cat to. So if the cat didn't get along with the 2 new cats, I hope you're following this story, they might drop it off at a shelter. And so she's checking all the shelters for fear that this cat is going to be dropped off at a shelter if it doesn't get along with the 2 new cats. So these are complications that you can't even begin to imagine, that someone takes care of your dog or your cat for 2 years. What do? Well, if you want the cat back because you've missed him so much and is your cat, be kind enough to thank the person who might have been taking care of the cat or the dog, and say, listen, I am so grateful you took care. And I know you fell in love with him because I've loved him for 5 years. And, you might have had him for 2 weeks, 6 weeks, 6 months, whatever. The longer they have the cat or the dog, the more difficult it might be to get the dog or cat back, because people get very attached to animals. And recognize and appreciate that and say, I get it, because I know how attached I've been to Tonka for the past 5 or 6 years. And so I get it that it'd be hard to give him up. And I want to figure out how we can do this so that you can respect that I lost him and I looked for him. And here is all the evidence of what I did to try to find him. And I want to respect that you took care of him for the last 6 days, 6 weeks, 6 months. And let's see if we can both be in Tonka's life. Because quite frankly, Tonka's alive because that other person took care of it for 6 days, 6 weeks, 6 months, right? So appreciate what they did. And often they will say, you're right. I don't know how many times in my mediations, when we have this conversation, the person who comes in saying, you're not getting this cat back. I've had this cat for 6 weeks and I love this cat. Say, wow, you're right. If Jan hadn't taken care of this cat, might not be alive. I might not be getting it back. So let's see what we can do. And most times I have been able to, at the very least, keep them in touch with each other, send pictures. And then if something happens, you might be transferred. You might have to leave your, pet loving apartment and not be able to keep a pet. And then that's when you pick up the phone and you call Debra and say, Debra, I can't take Junie with me. And so would you be willing to take him back? And if I can, I will. And if I can't, at least, you've given that person the opportunity to take the cat back. So there are so many things that people don't think about when that initial, oh, shit, that woman has my cat. She's not going to give it back and blah, blah, blah. And everybody gets aggressive and defensive and reactive. And I go, okay, let's all breathe. We're all going to think about what's best for Junie. We're not going to think about I have to win and you have to lose. We have to say, well, what's best for Junie? So right now, Junie's been with me for 6 weeks. He was with you for 6 years. When he saw you, he went out of his mind and he was so happy to see you. And he loves me too. And it's not like he's going to ditch me, although, they adjust really well. And I know there are a lot of animal behaviorists who say, oh, no, you can't do this. And I go, you know what? Dogs adjust a lot better than you can consider, especially if they've got 3 squares and a flop. They really don't mind that at all. But being able to communicate in a way that continues to value what's best for the pet is just incredible. And sometimes if there are small children involved and they've had the dog for a year or the cat for a year, and you look for it for 2 weeks and then you just said, I'm too busy, be gracious, live in grace and say, these people really have bonded with this dog. So maybe when they go on vacation, I'll take the dog. Maybe we'll, share it somehow, but be gracious to, as I said, to understand that they have now become attached to this wonderful dog that you love and you want back, and it's your dog. I get it. And let's see what we can do to make sure that happens. Either vice versa, you take it back and let them have time with it, or you leave it with them because they actually have more time to spend with it. I know there was a woman who broke her hip and her Afghan was taken, and it went through animal care and control. She didn't answer the phone. It was then given to an Afghan rescue and adopted. And the one thing that really hurt me deeply was that a lot of people in the Afghan rescue world said, well, she was 75 years old with a 9-year-old Afghan. That dog needed so much more exercise than she could give it. And I sat there and I said, she's lived with that dog for 9 years. That dog, she didn't abandon the dog. She broke her hip and had to recover. So the people had it for 4 months, but it wasn't as if she abandoned it. And unfortunately, in that scenario, because it went through animal care and control and it went through a rescue and it was rescued by contract, she will never get that dog back.
Well, it was interesting that you brought up the age thing, because I have a client that just lost a cat, lost her cat about a year ago, and is now looking for another cat. Well, starting to look for another cat. And she must be in her late 70s. And she said she's had people refuse to give her one because of her age. And it really bothers her. And
ageism in pet ownership, in rescues and shelters and even for breeders, is terrible because, first of all, you can always take it back. If something happens to the older person, you should always have the catch-all I could get hit by a car tomorrow and I'm in my 60s. So, my dog's going to be homeless, and are you going to take my dog back? Yeah. So you don't have a crystal ball. I remember in the 80s, maybe it was in the 90s, I had a 5-year-old Irish setter who had spondylosis, so I was never going to breed her. So I gave her to this woman who, her first words out of her mouth, it was funny you said that, was, I am 87 years old and don't tell me I'm too old to get a dog. And I went, I'm not going to tell you you're too old to get a dog. They had a beautiful fenced in yard. They were home all day long. The dog was pampered for her entire rest of her life. She lived to be 14. And she was in great shape by the end. But this was the kind of dog that they had never had before, that came when you called and was really well behaved, didn't pull them down the stairs and break their bones. So that was really good. But you really can't understand the value. And I know, Jan, you do this with all of your soul working stuff that makes us feel so much better. Your aromatherapies and things. Everyone knows that having a pet can extend your life, can give you a reason to get up in the morning. So if just generically, if you're 70, you can't have a cat, or you can't have a dog, it just, to me, really creates a downward spiral for people who've always had pets. And so, if you have a dog and it's the right kind of dog for the person, and maybe it's a rescue and you've done a lot of, I think rescues have missed the boat on allowing people, older people, to adopt older dogs, anywhere from 6 up. Because that way they're together, they're doing the things they want to do together, which is sit down and watch TV or go take short walks or whatever. It's really important. And, I know we are a little afar of, what do you do if you have lost your dog? But if you've lost your dog, and you can't find it, maybe getting one that's older and that's already trained will help fill that void as well, because it is a very important piece of your life. So make sure you have a microchip, make sure you have a collar with the name embroidered on it, or at least riveted to it so it can't be easily removed. And please, please, please take at least 4 to 6 weeks, even longer if you can, to look for the animal, because it really can turn up 4 to 6 weeks later. because the person might just be driving through your town and being a good Samaritan and then won't drive through your town again until the following month. And so you really have to make sure you do a conscientious effort of looking for your pet.
Absolutely. And so when I was having this conversation or whatever, because we were actually, because, you know, what you do is ingrained in me now and everything, and I'm talking about it. And I was asking her about her grandchildren, you know, or whatever. And she said, well, her grandson wouldn't take it. He has like, you know, probably because he has 2 dogs and about to have his 3rd child.
Yeah.
And her granddaughter might take her, and her daughter would not, because her daughter has 2 cats already and she doesn't think they'd get along. So I said to her, well, if you ever need a backup of somebody who would take the cat, no, you know, you can always, you know, come to me or whatever. But it was just, I think that as long as, like what you train us to do, make a plan for someone who's older, who says, okay, well, what if something, or any age, but especially if they're dealing with a rescue or somebody who doesn't want to give them, as long as they have a backup plan of some way to take care of this pet, like it really doesn't seem like they should be deprived to me. That's just,
no, as long as you take the time to think and not get defensive because they are giving you a hard time to get your pet, but say, you know, I get it. I'm 70 and how long might I be able to take care of a cat? But I'm financially capable and I have 2 or 3 people who will be able to step in. And the issue there is if you, oh, look who's coming. It's Junie telling me, stop. Go lay down. Go lay down. If you take the time to make a plan and have people in line to care for your pet. I often go to a lot of the independent living situations where they allow people to have small dogs. And I go, so do you check in with the people who they have put down as the person who's going to take their pet? No. I said, so here you are with people who have these little dogs who may or may not have to go to the hospital, and you don't have anybody that you know is going to come and take care of the pet. I said, so if you're older, just make sure that you don't think your grandkids will take your pets. Make sure you find someone like Jan who says, you know, if you do have an issue, I'm happy to take care of your pet for you, because it really makes a big difference having somebody who will definitely step up and say, no, I'm right here. But the other piece I meant to say before we were disturbed by Junie, most rescues require you to sign a contract that may state, and everybody should read their contracts that they sign when they adopt a dog, that you have to return the cat or the dog to them because they want to make sure where the cat or dog is. And that's not so terrible. Just make sure that when the cat or dog is going to your son, your daughter, your grandkids, your neighbor, Jan, that you tell them. Just be transparent. Say, hey, I know I have to return Tonka, but Debra Hamilton knows Tonka better than anyone. You know, she's the person who watched Tonka while I've traveled on business. And I would just love for you to consider her as the backup for Tonka, because Tonka doesn't need to go back to the rescue. They can go direct. He can go directly to this person, but you'll know where he's going. Mm-hmm. And I'm telling you, for most breeders or rescues, if you're transparent and let them know, they are going to allow you to give it to Jan if something happens to you, because it is about making sure the dog or cat has continuity. And if they know this person, it'll have continuity. And that's the piece that also happens when you have lost a dog. If in fact the person who took the dog or has cared for the dog while it was lost, if you have them as a backup, as continuity, that's huge. You know, there are ways to get through this. It's the worst feeling in the world. I know, Jan, you've had it. I've had it. Anyone who's owned a pet, if you haven't had it, God bless you, and I hope you never feel it. However, if your dog is gone, the feeling is just indescribable, unbelievable. And when you find them again, the relief that rushes over you is huge. And that sometimes is the reason why, you know, you can get heated if I've taken care of your dog for the last, 6 weeks, 6 months, and now you want it back. Just make sure you take a breath and you go, I get it. And I'm really appreciative of the fact that you took care of my pet. most people are not taking care of your pet because they stole it. Most people are doing a corporal work of mercy, and thank them for it. And then hope that you can find a way to get your pet back. And if you need help, don't worry about calling me. I'm happy to help you.
Thank you so much, Deborah. And this was great information. And just everybody out there, please keep your pets safe and healthy. Remember all those great tips of, microchipping collars, embroidered collars, any way you can think to identify them easily. And that way, if accidents or situations happen, then you can be reunited with your, loving companion there, or your, however you want to name them, because they are like everything to us.
Oh, they absolutely are. And remember that every dog's nose is a unique print. So if you want, you can ask your vet if they take nose prints, sort of like fingerprints. And make sure, since we're coming up to the 4th of July, and this will be an evergreen program, so maybe you won't be coming up to the 4th of July. However, remember to make sure your pet's on a leash on the 4th of July. Please don't leave them in the house while you're outside with a picnic, because once the fireworks start, somebody could just by accident leave the door open just a split second too long, and a firecracker will go off. It's the perfect storm. So just make sure that your dogs are on a leash or in a crate, or behind a baby gate in a room with the air conditioner and maybe some white noise going off to try to stave off the fear of firecrackers, so that they don't get out, because more dogs are lost on the 4th of July than any day of the year. So since we're coming up to that, I really want to stress, put them on a leash. Put them on a leash if you don't have a baby gate to put them in a room, because you really want to make it almost foolproof that they can't get outside. And you can't leave them walking around the house and yell at the people, shut the door. No, you can't do that. You need to make sure the dog is safe or the cat is safe, and people don't have to worry. I love being here with you, Jan, as always.
Oh, thank you so much, Deborah. And to all our listeners out there, thank you so much for joining. And if you have any topics you'd like us to discuss, please let me know, because I would love to accommodate and keep this conversation going. Have a great day.
You've been listening to Pets, People, Life, and Longevity, part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can catch every episode at exvadio.com/podcasts, the Apple Podcast app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Amazon Music, Audible, and wherever you find podcasts.